Are you two done yet?
No.
Well, what's so funny?
John Carter is Conan the Barbarian. In space!
Aristotle Part 2! You ever have a friend who comes up with a really great idea but explains it in a very dumb way, and you decide that you can explain the idea much better? That's pretty much how Aristotle felt about Plato's theory of forms. Less than thrilled with Plato's metaphysical dualism and what that entailed for the forms, Aristotle took the theory, chopped off the unnecessary bits, and slapped on a few new terms. The result was a distinction between what he called form and essence. When Aristotle says form, it can be easy to mistake it for Plato's form, but it isn't the same. Aristotle's idea of form is the physical shape of something, or what I referred to earlier as whatness. When we see a cat, we're able to identify it as a cat because we have evaluated its form. We ask ourselves, what is a cat? And we answer, an obnoxiously cute animal with the ability to go viral when they hit YouTube. That accounts for the cat's form, but what is it in particular that makes a cat form behave like a cat? Aristotle answers that question with the notion he calls essence. The essence of a thing is a set of qualities that make it the sort of thing it is. While some cats are fat, or black, or evil, this cat is none of those things. Its essence, to some degree, is different from any other cat. Take paper, for example. Nearly all paper has the same form, but not all paper has the same essence. The words on a piece of paper could characterize it as an essay just as well as a personal letter. The form of the paper may be the same, but the essence will be different depending on what words are on that piece of paper. For example, you see? Same form, different essence. Anyway, form and essence can tell us about an individual thing's substance, but it does not tell us everything. Because obviously, in this world, things are always changing. Whether it's a person or an inanimate object.
Like me.
Shut up. Whether it's a person or an inanimate object, things are always undergoing some kind of development. To explain this, Aristotle came up with two concepts called potentiality and actuality. An acorn is not a tree, but it has the potential of a tree. When it finally grows into a tree, we can say that the potentiality of the acorn has been changed into actuality. Consider this snack. It's delightful. It's delicious.
It's lovely.
But what is the teleological purpose of this snack? Why, to be eaten, of course. But what happens to food that we eat? Anyone want to comment?
It turns into poop.
Anyone who isn't a CD or an eraser? The food turns into poop? Shut up, Dragon H2. You don't get to talk.
Oh, I know. Pick me.
Fine. What happens to the snack if I eat it?
It turns into poop.
Exactly. So that snack that you're holding, that dinner you're preparing, it's gonna be poop soon. Enjoy. If you're paying attention, you might have noticed that Aristotle shares Plato's teleological view of the world. When an apple seed germinates, it doesn't turn into an orange tree. When I eat a snack, it doesn't turn into rainbow-colored pixie dust. And when Stephanie Meyer writes a book, it doesn't turn into Lord of the Rings. My war against Twilight rages on. Since nature is so full of changing things, Aristotle wondered what it could be that causes all this activity. Now, remember that to the ancient Greek, the idea that something could come from nothing made about as much sense as the idea of Ren and Stimpy as a kid's TV show. Since Aristotle observed that the world is full of motion, he came to the conclusion that something had to cause all that motion. His explanation was what he called the unmoved mover. The unmoved mover is a lot like Plato's demiurge, but it isn't the same, even though they are both very different from the traditional Christian god. The unmoved mover cannot love or perform conscious acts of will, because to love makes you vulnerable to being affected, and the unmoved mover cannot be affected because it is the original source of all motion. In Aristotle's teleological view of the universe, the unmoved mover serves as a sort of final cause. All things that are seeking to be complete, whether consciously or unconsciously, are seeking to be like the unmoved mover. To put it like my book puts it, since all things in nature are moved by their innate love of God, Aristotle literally believes that it is love that makes the world go round. Well, we've talked about Aristotle's theory of knowledge, his views on reality, his cosmology, but there's one thing left to talk about, and it's a doozy. One of the things that Aristotle is best remembered for is his ethical theory, which is influential even today. He starts out by stating the obvious. We all want to be happy. I mean, most people, if they're honest with themselves, can admit that the goal of all human activity is the achievement of happiness. If you see some dude watching a show that makes him happy, you can ask him why he's watching it, that's fine. But how dumbass would you have to be to ask him why he wants to be happy? The problem is that while everyone wants to be happy, not everyone can agree on what happiness is. I mean, if you ask Charlie Brown, happiness is anything that you love, but John Lennon says that happiness is a warm gun. Aristotle makes some room for this relativism, but he points out that perhaps it is in fulfilling our purpose that we find happiness. If his metaphysics gives us any clue, it's that Aristotle believed that the purpose of a thing is what makes up its true nature. He applies the same idea to his ethics. He says that in seeking your virtue, or what you do really well, you'll be happy. But he points out that if you actively seek nothing but happiness, then you teeter on the edge of hedonism. And that's Aristotle's ethics in a nutshell, really. Everything in moderation. You can enjoy pleasure, no problem, but if you enjoy too much pleasure, then you're being self-indulgent. If you don't enjoy enough pleasure, then you're being puritanical and, well, not very much fun.
Oh, you're no fun anymore.
Enjoying just the right amount of pleasure is a virtue, while being in excess or deficit of this virtue is a vice. The sweet spot between vices is what Aristotle calls the golden mean. In math speak, a mean is an average or median. In everything that you do, you shouldn't be too much of one thing or another, moderation in all things. He goes on to say that if you want to live a good life, you have to actually want to be good. If you're taking a test and you resist the temptation to cheat, that's good, but it would have been better if the thought of cheating had never even occurred to you. Similarly, if you want to save a drowning child just because you want to get a reward, well, you're saving a drowning child, so that's good, but you're being good for the wrong reasons. In the end, being ethical is more like learning to ride a bike than a mathematical equation. No one can tell you how to ride a bike. You have to get up on it and find out the right amount of balance to keep you moving. There is no formula for an ethical life. You've got to figure out where your limits lie.
Man's got to know his limitations.
What just happened? And why is my hair longer?
The awesomeness of that Clint Eastwood line propelled you 2 months into the future and transported you to your grandma's house.
Oh. Where was I?
Wrapping up Aristotle.
Right. Well, that's Aristotle in a nutshell. He is credited as being one of the first major empiricists, and empiricism is a movement that would survive for thousands of years to come. His contributions were not just limited to the field of philosophy, but science as well, and his logic was used without modification for quite some time. In a way, all of philosophical history is a series of elaborations on the thoughts of Plato and Aristotle, and their ideas were the foundations upon which countless philosophers, scientists, and theologians would build their systems. Aristotle's ideas dominated Western thought after his rediscovery in the Middle Ages, but that's a story for another time. Until then, this is The Idiot, signing out.
I'm going slightly mad. I'm going slightly mad. It finally happened. It finally happened. Oh yes, it finally happened.